Jasmine Washington stands in the airport terminal watching the chaos unfold on every screen, 12 planes grounded, thousands stranded, and the airline's CEO sweating profusely on live TV. All because they wouldn't let her, a black woman tech CEO, board in first class. Before we dive into this incredible story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. If you believe discrimination has no place in our society, hit that like button right now and subscribe to hear more stories about people fighting back against injustice. Now, let's discover how one woman's smartphone brought an entire airline to its knees. Jasmine Washington was used to being underestimated. At 38, she had built CyberShield from a small startup into a cybersecurity powerhouse worth billions. With her Harvard MBA and 15 years of tech experience, she'd earned her place among Silicon Valley's elite. But none of that seemed to matter as she stood at Gate B-17 in Atlanta International Airport, watching the gate agent's face contort with suspicion. "There seems to be an issue with your ticket, ma'am," said Monica Parker, the gate agent, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness as she examined Jasmine's digital boarding pass. The first-class passengers were boarding, and Jasmine had queued up with her carry-on luggage, eager to settle in for the 5-hour flight to San Francisco. "What kind of issue?" Jasmine asked, maintaining her professional composure despite the familiar sinking feeling in her stomach. She had a crucial meeting with potential investors in Silicon Valley the next morning. This $5 billion deal could transform CyberShield from a national success into a global cybersecurity leader. Monica's eyes narrowed. "This first-class ticket doesn't look right. We'll need to verify it." Jasmine pulled out her phone and opened the airline app. "Here's my confirmation. I purchased this ticket 3 weeks ago." She also presented her ID and business card, explaining her position as CEO of CyberShield and her important meeting with Silicon Valley investors. Meanwhile, Monica waved through 3 white passengers with barely a glance at their tickets. They strolled past Jasmine with the easy confidence of people who never had their belongings searched or their presence questioned. "I'll need to call my supervisor," Monica said, reaching for her phone. Jasmine checked her watch. The flight was boarding, and her patience was wearing thin. "Is there a problem with my payment?" "The ticket is confirmed in your system." Bradley Thompson, the supervisor, appeared moments later. With his pressed uniform and clipped tone, he projected authority as he reviewed Jasmine's information with the same skepticism as Monica. "This doesn't appear to be a valid first-class ticket," Bradley stated firmly. "We see this sometimes when people try to upgrade themselves without paying." Heat rose to Jasmine's cheeks. "Are you suggesting I'm using a fake ticket? I paid $4,000 for this seat." Bradley's expression hardened. "Ma'am, perhaps there's been a misunderstanding about what class of service you purchased. The implications were clear, they didn't believe someone like her could afford first class." By now, other passengers were staring. Some had their phones out, recording yet another incident of a black person being harassed while simply existing in public space. A security officer, Walter Morris, approached with his hand resting casually on his holster. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, looking directly at Jasmine rather than the airline staff. Trapped between missing her flight and accepting humiliation, Jasmine made a calculated decision. "Fine. Just give me whatever seat is available. I need to make this flight." "We have a middle seat in row 32, Monica offered with false helpfulness. Jasmine took the reassigned boarding pass, aware of the whispers and stares following her as she walked away from the first-class line. The indignity burned, but she forced herself to focus on tomorrow's meeting. Some battles had to wait. Row 32 was in the back of the plane, next to the lavatories. Jasmine squeezed into the middle seat between a man whose body spilled over the armrest and a woman who glared at her as if Jasmine had personally chosen this arrangement. The seat was designed for someone much smaller, and Jasmine's knees pressed against the seat in front. Throughout the flight, Jasmine noticed how differently she was treated by flight attendant Sarah Wilson. While Sarah smiled warmly at white passengers, offering them extra snacks and checking on their comfort, her interactions with Jasmine were curt and minimal. "Water," Sarah said, thrusting a small cup at Jasmine without meeting her eyes, then immediately turning to the white passenger beside her with a cheerful, "What can I get for you, sir?" "We have Coke, Diet Coke, ginger ale." 5 miserable hours later, as the plane descended toward San Francisco, Jasmine massaged her cramped legs and sore back. She had spent the flight reviewing her presentation instead of resting in the spacious first-class seat she had paid for. Tomorrow's meeting would determine CyberShield's future, and she would have to excel despite exhaustion and the lingering sting of humiliation. As passengers disembarked, Jasmine noticed Sarah warmly thanking white passengers for flying with them while giving her nothing more than a curt nod. It wasn't the first time Jasmine had experienced such treatment, but something about this incident felt different. Perhaps it was the blatant nature of the discrimination, or perhaps it was because after years of fighting to be recognized in the tech world, she was tired of having to prove her worth over and over again. One thing was certain. Jasmine Washington wasn't going to let this incident go unchallenged. But first, she had investors to impress. The next morning, Jasmine arrived at the imposing glass headquarters of Venture Partners in downtown San Francisco. Despite her best efforts with hotel room ironing and extra makeup, she couldn't completely hide the effects of her uncomfortable flight. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and her usually impeccable suit looked slightly rumpled. "Ms. Washington?" The receptionist's voice carried a note of surprise as she looked up from her computer. "They're waiting for you in the Redwood conference room." Jasmine straightened her shoulders and followed the young woman down a hallway lined with photographs of tech success stories. She couldn't help but notice that nearly every face in these images was white and male. 3 people rose as Jasmine entered the conference room. Richard Preston, the lead investor, was in his 60s with silver hair and the casual confidence of old money. Lauren Davis, a blonde woman in her 40s wearing a designer suit, gave Jasmine a thin smile. Nathan Gregory, the youngest of the 3, barely looked up from his tablet as he mumbled a greeting. "Thank you for coming all the way from Atlanta," Richard said, gesturing toward an empty chair. "Your company has been making quite a splash in cybersecurity circles." Jasmine launched into her presentation, fighting through fatigue. She stumbled over a few figures during the financial projections, and noticed Lauren and Nathan exchange glances. "Perhaps we should take a break," Lauren suggested, her tone making it clear she was already losing interest. "Actually," Jasmine said, drawing herself up, "I'd like to show you what sets CyberShield apart from every other cybersecurity firm you've considered." She pulled out her smartphone and connected it to the room's display system. "What you're about to see is our proprietary mobile firewall technology. It represents a fundamental shift in how network security operates." Richard leaned forward slightly, the first sign of genuine interest. "Go on." "Currently, network security is building walls around systems and hoping they hold," Jasmine explained, her voice growing stronger as she moved into her area of expertise. "Our approach is different. We've developed technology that allows complete control of digital network access from a smartphone." She tapped her phone screen, and the presentation shifted to a real-time demonstration. This application can identify every device connected to a network and control their access permissions instantly. It can temporarily block specific signals, redirect traffic, or shut down entire communication channels if a threat is detected. Richard's eyebrows rose as he watched Jasmine demonstrate how the app could isolate specific devices from the network without disrupting others. "That's impressive," he admitted. Nathan finally looked up from his tablet. "And you developed this yourself?" The skepticism in his voice was unmistakable. "I led the development team," Jasmine replied evenly. "I have a background in network architecture and advanced encryption." "Where did you study again?" Nathan pressed, as if certain her credentials couldn't possibly be legitimate. "MIT for my undergraduate and master's in computer science, before my MBA at Harvard," Jasmine answered, keeping her tone professional despite the familiar pattern of questioning she faced regularly as a black woman in tech. Lauren tapped her manicured nails on the table. And who handles the actual coding for your team? The implication was clear. Surely Jasmine wasn't technical enough to understand the product her company was selling. I still write code regularly, Jasmine said. The core encryption algorithm for this product was my design. The meeting continued with increasingly pointed questions about Jasmine's background, experience, and technical knowledge, questions she knew her white male counterparts rarely had to answer. Despite this, by the end of the presentation, Richard seemed genuinely interested in CyberShield's potential. This has been educational, Richard said as they concluded. We'll need to discuss internally, but I think there's something here worth exploring further. It wasn't the enthusiastic response Jasmine had hoped for, but it wasn't a rejection either. As they gathered their materials, Jasmine overheard Lauren speaking to Nathan in the hallway. She's quite articulate for a black woman, isn't she? Wonder who's really running the technical side of things. Jasmine pretended not to hear as she packed up her presentation materials. The comment stung, but it wasn't surprising. It was the same doubt she'd faced throughout her career, the same assumptions she constantly had to disprove. Once outside the building, Jasmine called her best friend Aisha Coleman. How'd it go? Aisha asked. About what you'd expect, Jasmine sighed. They were surprised I could string sentences together and know what an algorithm is. Typical, Aisha replied. And how was the flight? Jasmine recounted the humiliating experience at the gate, her relegation to economy, and the differential treatment throughout the flight. You need to file a complaint, Aisha urged. This happens because people don't speak up. I know, Jasmine agreed. But I'm so tired of having to be the one who speaks up, who educates, who fights these battles. I get it, Aisha said softly. But if not you, then who? After hanging up, Jasmine booked her return flight for the following evening. Despite the temptation to switch airlines, she deliberately chose the same carrier. This time, she would not back down if challenged. It was time to stand her ground. Have you ever reached that breaking point where you refuse to be disrespected one more time? Comment number 1 if you've ever had to stand your ground against unfair treatment. Like this video if you believe everyone deserves equal respect regardless of their appearance. Subscribe to hear more stories of people fighting back against discrimination with dignity and strength. Now, let's see what happened when Jasmine decided enough was enough. Would you have done the same in her position? 2 days later, Jasmine arrived at San Francisco International Airport 3 hours before her flight. She was determined to fly first class as she had paid for, and she wasn't going to let anyone tell her otherwise. This time, she came prepared. She had screenshots of her original ticket purchase, her credit card statement showing the first-class charge, and the airline's own confirmation email. She even wore her company polo shirt with the CyberShield logo prominently displayed, though she hated having to prove her professional status. Approaching the check-in counter, Jasmine noticed the immediate flicker of doubt in gate agent Douglas Miller's eyes as he scanned her first-class ticket. Is there a problem? Jasmine asked before he could speak, her voice calm but firm. Douglas glanced up, startled by her preemptive question. I need to verify this ticket. It's showing some discrepancies in our system. What kind of discrepancies? Jasmine asked, pulling out her phone. I have my confirmation right here, along with my credit card statement showing I paid $4,000 for a first-class ticket. Douglas frowned at his screen. That's not what I'm seeing. According to our records, you were issued an economy ticket for your outbound flight. Because your gate agent in Atlanta refused to honor my first-class ticket, Jasmine replied evenly. I have the original purchase confirmation right here. I'll need to call a manager, Douglas said, reaching for his phone. Please do, Jasmine agreed, pulling out her own phone and opening the camera app. And I'll be recording this interaction for my records. Other passengers in line began to notice the exchange. A few moved away, uncomfortable with the brewing confrontation, but others watched with interest, some even nodding in silent support. Kevin Phillips, the manager, arrived quickly. With his pressed suit and dismissive manner, he reminded Jasmine of countless other authority figures who had attempted to intimidate her throughout her life. "Ma'am, I understand there's some confusion about your ticket," Kevin began, his tone condescending. "There's no confusion on my part," Jasmine replied, her phone still recording. "I purchased a first-class ticket. I have proof of payment. Your staff in Atlanta discriminated against me by refusing to honor it, and it appears you're about to do the same." Kevin's expression hardened. "That's a serious accusation. If you continue to disrupt check-in, I'll have to ask security to remove you from the flight altogether." "On what grounds?" Jasmine challenged, raising her voice slightly to ensure others could hear. "For requesting the service I paid for? Or is it because you don't think I belong in first class?" By now, a small crowd had gathered. Some passengers muttered in disapproval, whether of Jasmine or the airline staff wasn't clear, while others openly watched the confrontation unfold. "I'd like to speak with your supervisor," Jasmine continued, unwavering. "I am the supervisor on duty," Kevin replied stiffly. "Then I'd like to speak with your supervisor," Jasmine insisted. After a tense standoff, Jennifer Adams, a senior airline representative, finally appeared. Unlike her colleagues, Jennifer seemed genuinely concerned about resolving the situation. "Ms. Washington, I apologize for the confusion," Jennifer began, reviewing the documentation Jasmine provided. "I can see here that you did indeed purchase a first-class ticket." "Yes, I did," Jasmine confirmed. "Just as I explained to your colleagues." Jennifer tapped at her tablet, then nodded. "I've verified your purchase. You're confirmed in first class for today's flight." Kevin started to protest, but Jennifer silenced him with a look. "Ms. Washington, you're all set. We apologize for any inconvenience." Jasmine nodded, accepting the apology but noting that Jennifer had carefully avoided acknowledging the underlying issue of discrimination. Once aboard, Jasmine settled into her spacious first-class seat, the one she had paid for and deserved. But her relief was short-lived. Flight attendant Gregory Wilson seemed determined to provide her with substandard service compared to the other first-class passengers. While Gregory cheerfully offered white passengers their choice of pre-flight beverages, his interaction with Jasmine was curt. "Water?" he asked, barely pausing as he passed her seat. "I'd prefer champagne, please," Jasmine replied, meeting his gaze directly. Gregory looked momentarily surprised before nodding stiffly and moving on. When he returned with her champagne, he practically dropped the glass on her tray without a word, then turned to the white businessman across the aisle with a warm smile. "Can I get you anything else, sir? Perhaps a blanket or some headphones?" Throughout the flight, Jasmine observed Gregory's attentiveness to white passengers while he seemed to forget her existence. When meals were served, white passengers were asked about their preferences while Jasmine was simply handed a tray without discussion. When she pressed her call button for another beverage, Gregory took 15 minutes to respond, despite answering other calls promptly. As the plane hit turbulence midway through the flight, Jasmine found herself gripping the armrests, not from fear of the bumpy air but from the building rage within her. She was tired, bone-deep tired, of being treated as less than. Of having to fight for the basic respect automatically granted to others. But as the cabin lights dimmed and passengers around her dozed, an idea began to form in Jasmine's mind. CyberShield's mobile firewall technology had applications far beyond what she had demonstrated to the investors. In the right hands, her hands, it could do more than protect networks. It could disrupt them. Precisely. Temporarily. And in ways that would be nearly impossible to trace. She pulled out her laptop, careful to angle the screen away from curious eyes, and began coding. By the time the captain announced their initial descent into Atlanta, Jasmine had outlined a plan. One that would force the airline to confront its pattern of discrimination in a way they couldn't ignore. The captain's voice crackled over the intercom again. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've been instructed to divert to Atlanta due to some technical issues at our destination. We apologize for any inconvenience." Jasmine closed her laptop, a small smile playing at her lips. The diversion wasn't part of her plan, but it would give her more time to perfect it. Sometimes, she thought, the universe had a way of providing opportunities exactly when needed. Back in her Atlanta apartment, Jasmine sat cross-legged on her couch, scrolling through the video she had recorded at the San Francisco airport. She had captured everything: the ticket verification, the manager's threats, the reluctant resolution. Without editing or embellishment, the footage told a powerful story of prejudice and disrespect. Her finger hovered over the tweet button. Once she pressed it, there would be no going back. Her private humiliation would become public discourse. She would be exposed to scrutiny, judgment, and potentially backlash. But she would also be speaking truth to power. She pressed the button. Within an hour, her post had been shared 5,000 times. By morning, it had reached 100,000. The hashtag #FirstClassWhileBlack was trending nationwide, with people of color sharing their own experiences of discrimination while traveling. Denied boarding on first class despite confirmed ticket. Gate agent said I didn't look like I belonged there. #FirstClassWhileBlack, flight attendant followed me to bathroom thinking I was trying to sneak into first class. I had a first class ticket. #FirstClassWhileBlack, asked 3 times if I was in the right seat in first class while white passengers boarded without question. #FirstClassWhileBlack, news outlets began calling. First local Atlanta stations, then national networks. Jasmine's phone buzzed constantly with notifications and requests for interviews. She selected her appearances carefully, choosing journalists known for their integrity and fairness. The airline's initial response was predictably generic. "We are committed to treating all our passengers with respect and dignity. We take these allegations seriously and are investigating the incident." But as pressure mounted and more stories emerged, the company's stock began to drop. Shareholders became nervous. The airline's social media accounts were flooded with angry comments and calls for boycotts. 3 days after her original post, Jasmine appeared on Morning America, composed and articulate as she recounted her experience. "This isn't about one incident or one airline," she explained. "It's about a pattern of behavior that forces Black people and other minorities to constantly prove we belong in spaces others enter without question. It's exhausting and it's wrong." The host nodded sympathetically. The airline's CEO, Thomas Anderson, issued a statement this morning saying they're conducting a thorough investigation and will implement additional training for staff. "What's your response to that?" Jasmine smiled thinly. "Training is important, but this isn't a knowledge gap. The gate agents and flight attendants knew exactly what a first-class ticket looks like. They chose not to believe mine was legitimate because of what I look like. That's not a training issue, it's a culture issue." By that afternoon, the airline's stock had dropped 12%. Thomas Anderson, the CEO, appeared on CNBC to Damage Control, his forehead shiny with sweat under the studio lights. "We deeply regret Ms. Washington's experience," he said, his voice strained. "It does not reflect our company values. We're taking immediate steps to address this issue, including reaching out to Ms. Washington directly to apologize." But the apology call never came. Instead, Jasmine began receiving messages of a different sort. Some were supportive: "Thank you for speaking up. This happened to me last year and I didn't have the courage to say anything." Others were threatening. "Who do you think you are? Stop playing the race card and ruining people's livelihoods." As the social media storm intensified, Jasmine's employees at CyberShield rallied around her. They posted messages of support, shared their own experiences, and defended her against online trolls trying to discredit her story. A week after her initial post, with the airline still fumbling its response and public outrage showing no signs of abating, Jasmine consulted with her legal team. "They've violated multiple anti-discrimination laws," said her attorney, Charles Bennett. "We have grounds for a substantial lawsuit." Jasmine nodded, considering her options. A lawsuit might bring financial compensation, but would it create real change? She thought about all the people who had shared their stories under the hashtag #FirstClassWhileBlack hashtag. People who had been humiliated, disrespected, and made to feel unwelcome simply because of their race. A one-time settlement wouldn't fix the systemic issues that allowed such discrimination to flourish. That evening, alone in her home office, Jasmine made a decision. The airline needed more than bad publicity or a slap on the wrist. They needed to understand the real-world consequences of their actions, to feel the impact of discrimination as tangibly as those they discriminated against. She opened her laptop and began to code. CyberShield's technology gave her a unique capability to deliver a message that couldn't be ignored. It was time to show what happened when power was in different hands. Have you ever wished you could make someone truly understand the impact of their actions? Comment number 1 if you believe companies need to experience real consequences for discrimination. Like this video if you think technology can be a tool for justice when used responsibly. Subscribe to hear more stories about people using their unique skills to fight back against systemic racism. Now, let's see how Jasmine turned her expertise into a powerful statement that no corporate boardroom could ignore. Would you have the courage to take such a bold step? The CyberShield headquarters buzzed with tension as Jasmine gathered her core team in the secure conference room. The glass walls had been frosted for privacy, and all electronic devices except those needed for the operation had been left outside. "What I'm about to propose goes beyond our normal operations," Jasmine began, looking at each team member in turn. "I want to be clear that participation is completely voluntary. Anyone uncomfortable with this plan can leave now, no questions asked, no consequences." No one moved. Michael Robinson, her chief engineer, spoke first. "We've all seen what happened to you, Jasmine. We've all experienced some version of it ourselves. Whatever you're planning, we're with you." Jasmine nodded gratefully. "Our mobile firewall technology gives us capabilities that few people understand. We've always used it to protect networks. Today, we're going to use it to send a message." She brought up a diagram on the screen showing the airline's digital infrastructure. Their entire operation depends on a complex network of interconnected systems: booking, check-in, flight operations, communications. We can temporarily disrupt specific parts of this network without causing any safety issues or permanent damage. Vanessa Martinez, their legal counsel, raised her hand. "I need to be clear about the legal implications. What you're suggesting could potentially violate computer fraud statutes." "I understand the risks," Jasmine acknowledged. "That's why I'm not asking anyone else to implement the actual disruption. I'll do that myself." She outlined Operation Wake Up Call in detail. Phase 1 would target the airline's booking system, making it impossible for them to process new reservations for exactly 18 minutes, a reference to the 18 documented cases of racial discrimination the company had settled quietly over the past year. Phase 2 would be more visible, temporary disruption of non-essential communications systems on 12 specific aircraft. Representing the 12 months during which the airline had failed to address its discriminatory practices despite internal complaints. Each plane would experience a precise 3-minute communication freeze, enough to cause confusion and draw attention without compromising safety. The FAA and NTSB will investigate, Michael pointed out. They have forensic capabilities. Which is why we'll be using a modified version of our Ghost protocol, Jasmine explained. The disruption will appear to come from within their own systems, a technical glitch rather than an external attack. For the next 4 hours, the team refined the plan, identifying potential vulnerabilities and establishing safety protocols to ensure no critical flight systems would be affected. They set up multiple fail-safes that would automatically terminate the operation if any unexpected variables emerged. As evening fell, the team dispersed, leaving Jasmine alone in her office. She sat at her desk, staring at the single command that would initiate Phase 1. Was she crossing a line? Perhaps. But sometimes lines needed to be crossed to redraw boundaries. She pressed enter. Across the country, airline reservation agents stared at frozen screens. Customer service lines lit up as travelers found themselves unable to book flights online. IT departments scrambled to identify the source of the outage. For precisely 18 minutes, the airline's booking capability was paralyzed. Then, as suddenly as it had disappeared, functionality returned. Relief washed over frazzled employees who assumed the crisis had passed. Jasmine watched from her office as the airline's internal communications lit up with confusion and concern. No one had connected the outage to her yet. That would come later. 24 hours later, she initiated Phase 2. Sitting in her living room with 3 separate monitors tracking flight paths and communications, she activated the targeted disruption. One by one, 12 aircraft in different parts of the country lost non-essential communications simultaneously. Pilots found themselves unable to contact company dispatchers. Airport gates couldn't receive updated arrival information. Passenger entertainment systems went dark. Major news networks broke into regular programming with urgent updates. Breaking news: multiple aircraft experiencing unprecedented simultaneous communication failures. FAA investigating possible cyber attack. At precisely 3 minutes, communications were restored to all affected aircraft. But by then, the damage was done. Flights had been grounded or diverted. Schedules were in chaos. Passengers were frightened and angry. And most importantly, everyone was paying attention. As the airline's leadership struggled to explain the mysterious technical failures, Jasmine sent an anonymous message directly to CEO Thomas Anderson's personal email: 12 planes. 3 minutes each. 18 minutes of booking system downtime. These numbers correspond to documented cases of racial discrimination by your airline that were ignored or dismissed. This was a demonstration, not an attack. If you want to prevent further disruptions, implement real changes to address systemic racism within your organization. You have 72 hours to publicly commit to specific, measurable actions. The message was untraceable, bounced through so many proxy servers that even the best cybersecurity experts would find themselves chasing digital ghosts. Jasmine closed her laptop and poured herself a glass of wine. For the first time since her humiliation at the airport, she felt a sense of balance being restored. Power was shifting, and those who had been comfortable in their privilege were finally feeling uncomfortable. Now she would wait and see if they had received the message. At the airline's headquarters, chaos reigned. Emergency meetings had been called throughout the night as executives tried to understand what had happened to their systems. The boardroom was filled with haggard-looking men and women who hadn't slept in 24 hours, their ties loosened and suit jackets discarded over chair backs. Edward Roberts, the IT director, stood at the front of the room, his presentation slides showing nothing but question marks. "The bottom line is we don't know," he admitted, rubbing his bloodshot eyes. "There's no evidence of a security breach. No malware. No unusual access patterns. It's as if our systems just decided to take a break." CEO Thomas Anderson slammed his fist on the table. "Systems don't just take a break, Edward. Someone did this to us, and I want to know who." Patricia Hughes, the chief information officer, spoke up. "We've run every diagnostic possible. Whatever caused this was sophisticated enough to leave no footprint. We're bringing in external consultants, but honestly, I've never seen anything like it." Thomas pulled out his phone and showed them the anonymous email. "This came to my personal account. How did they get that address? And what do these numbers mean? 12 planes, 3 minutes, 18 minutes. The room fell silent as executives exchanged uncomfortable glances. "Sir," began the head of human resources hesitantly, "there were 12 discrimination complaints filed by black passengers last year that were escalated to corporate. And? Thomas demanded. And they were all dismissed as customer misunderstandings, she finished quietly. Patricia added, the booking system was down for exactly 18 minutes. That's specific. Thomas's face reddened. Are you suggesting this is connected to that social media nonsense about the black CEO? That's absurd. Sir, Edward interjected, the email specifically mentions racial discrimination. And the timing, coming right after the hashtag #FirstClassWhileBlack controversy. I've heard enough, Thomas snapped. Get the FBI involved. This is cyber terrorism. Within hours, FBI cybercrime specialists were combing through the airline systems. Agent Joshua Reynolds led the investigation, his team setting up in a conference room converted into a temporary command center. We need access to all your internal communications, Reynolds informed Thomas. Emails, chat logs, everything. Is that really necessary? Thomas asked, suddenly uncomfortable. Surely you should be focusing on finding the hackers. Reynolds fixed him with a steady gaze. In my experience, Mr. Anderson, attacks like this are rarely random. Understanding the motive helps us identify the perpetrator. Reluctantly, Thomas authorized the access. It was a decision he would soon regret. By the next morning, the FBI had uncovered something the airline had tried to keep buried, internal emails and training materials that explicitly profiled certain passengers based on race. Look for passengers who seem out of place, read one training document for gate agents. Trust your instincts about who belongs in premium cabins. Another email from a regional manager stated, too many upgrade certificates are being used by non-frequent flyers. Be more stringent in verification for passengers who don't fit our typical premium demographic. While these documents carefully avoided explicitly mentioning race, the implication was clear, especially when paired with emails from supervisors praising gate agents for being discerning about who they allowed into first class. As if that weren't damaging enough, a tech-savvy FBI analyst discovered employee chat groups where staff openly shared racist jokes and comments about passengers of color. Had another one trying to sit in first today, read one message. Told her there must be a mistake with her ticket. Should have seen her face. The responses included laughing emojis and similar anecdotes. When these findings leaked to the media, though no one could prove who leaked them, public outrage reached new heights. The airline stock plummeted 28% in a single day. Board members began calling emergency meetings without the CEO. Have you ever discovered that a problem you thought was isolated was actually part of a larger pattern? Comment number 1 if you've witnessed systemic discrimination that others tried to dismiss as isolated incidents. Like this video if you believe transparency is essential for accountability. Subscribe to follow more stories about corporate accountability and justice. Now, let's see what happened when the airline's dirty secrets were exposed to the world. Would you have predicted what happened next? Meanwhile, Jasmine received an encrypted message from an unexpected source. A whistleblower inside the airline identified only as Samuel Jackson. I've worked for this company for 15 years, the message read. What happened to you happens every day. I've collected evidence of discriminatory practices that go all the way to executive level. I can't come forward publicly, I need this job, but I want to help. Attached were internal memos showing that the airline had conducted passenger demographic analysis of their premium cabins and implemented unofficial policies to maintain the exclusive atmosphere of first class. There were also statistics showing that black passengers with first-class tickets were 3 times more likely to be questioned about their ticket status than white passengers. This was the smoking gun. Evidence that what happened to Jasmine wasn't an isolated incident but part of a systemic pattern. As Jasmine was considering how best to use this new information, her phone rang with an unfamiliar number. Ms. Washington? This is Agent Joshua Reynolds with the FBI Cybercrime Unit. We'd like to ask you some questions about the recent incidents involving your airline dispute and the subsequent technical failures they experienced. The moment Jasmine had anticipated had arrived. The question was, had they found evidence linking her to the disruption, or were they simply exploring all angles? "I'm happy to help any way I can, Agent Reynolds," she replied calmly. "Would you like to meet at my office tomorrow morning?" As she hung up, Jasmine began preparing for what might be the most important confrontation yet. The next morning, Jasmine arrived at CyberShield headquarters an hour early to prepare. She had briefed her legal team and ensured that key employees knew exactly what to say, and what not to say, if questioned. The conference room was ready with coffee, water, and a subtle display of the company's industry awards and government contracts visible on the credenza. At precisely 9 o'clock, the receptionist announced the arrival of the FBI. Agent Joshua Reynolds entered first, followed by a younger agent and a technical specialist carrying a laptop bag. Reynolds was not what Jasmine had expected, an African-American man in his early 40s with intelligent eyes and a reserved demeanor. "Ms. Washington," he said, extending his hand. "Thank you for meeting with us." "Of course," Jasmine replied, shaking his hand firmly. "I understand you're investigating the technical issues the airline experienced. As a cybersecurity expert, I'm happy to offer any insights that might help." Reynolds smiled slightly. "I appreciate that. Though I suspect you might have more than professional insights to offer." They settled around the conference table, and Reynolds began with standard questions about Jasmine's dispute with the airline. She answered truthfully, recounting the discrimination she had faced and her decision to share her experience on social media. "And you had no involvement in the subsequent technical failures the airline experienced?" Reynolds asked, watching her closely. "What kind of technical failures are we talking about?" Jasmine asked innocently. The technical specialist opened his laptop. "Their booking system went down for exactly 18 minutes. Then, 12 specific aircraft lost non-essential communications simultaneously for exactly 3 minutes each. These disruptions occurred shortly after your social media posts went viral." Jasmine maintained a thoughtful expression. "That's certainly an unusual coincidence. As a cybersecurity professional, I can tell you that such precise, targeted disruptions would require sophisticated knowledge of their systems and advanced technology to execute without detection." "Technology like your company's mobile firewall?" Reynolds suggested. "Potentially," Jasmine acknowledged. "Though any number of cybersecurity tools could be adapted for such purposes if someone had the expertise." "What did your forensic analysis find?" The technical specialist looked uncomfortable. "That's the thing. We found nothing. No malware signatures, no unauthorized access, no data exfiltration. It's as if their systems momentarily forgot how to communicate with each other." "Interesting," Jasmine said. "That would be consistent with a very sophisticated operation." Reynolds leaned forward. "Ms. Washington, let me be direct. We know the airline received an anonymous message connecting these disruptions to racial discrimination cases. We know about your dispute with them. And we know your company possesses technology that could theoretically cause such disruptions without leaving typical forensic evidence." "That sounds like circumstantial connections at best, Agent Reynolds," Jasmine replied calmly. "As I'm sure you're aware, coincidences aren't evidence." At that moment, Michael Robinson entered with a stack of documents. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but Ms. Washington asked me to provide these records showing our system activities during the time frames in question." The documents showed that CyberShield security testing had been focused on completely different client networks during the airline disruptions. While these records could have been fabricated, they created another layer of deniability. "We take security very seriously," Jasmine explained. "All our system activities are logged and verified by third-party auditors. As you can see, our teams were engaged with scheduled security testing for government clients during both incidents." Reynolds examined the documents while Jasmine continued, "I understand you need to investigate all possibilities, but I wonder if you're also investigating the airline's discriminatory practices with equal vigor. After all, they've violated multiple federal anti-discrimination laws." A subtle shift occurred in Reynolds' demeanor. We go where the evidence leads us, Ms. Washington. And yes, in the course of our investigation, we've uncovered some concerning internal communications at the airline. I imagine you have, Jasmine said. The problem with discrimination is that it's rarely isolated. It's usually systemic, embedded in policies and practices that might not explicitly mention race but are designed to produce racially biased outcomes. Reynolds nodded slowly. I'm familiar with the concept. Their eyes met in a moment of unspoken understanding. Reynolds, as a black man in the FBI, had likely faced his own battles with discrimination. Hypothetically speaking, Reynolds said after a pause, if someone wanted to find more evidence of discriminatory practices, they might want to look at the CEO's personal devices rather than just official company communications. Sometimes people are more candid in their private messages. Jasmine raised an eyebrow, recognizing the deliberate hint. That's an interesting investigative approach. Reynolds gathered his notes. Well, Ms. Washington, I think we have what we need for now. If we have any further questions, we'll be in touch. As they were preparing to leave, Reynolds lingered behind his colleagues. In a lower voice, he added, there are more whistleblowers coming forward within the airline. Internal reports of discrimination that were buried. Flight attendants who were instructed to provide different levels of service based on, let's call them, passenger profiles. That doesn't surprise me, Jasmine replied. No, I suppose it wouldn't, Reynolds agreed. The board has called an emergency meeting tomorrow morning at 10. I imagine it will be consequential. With that cryptic comment, he left, leaving Jasmine to wonder if she had just experienced an interrogation or received intelligence from an unlikely ally. Either way, she now had crucial information. The airline's board was meeting tomorrow, and the CEO's personal devices might contain damning evidence. It was time for the final phase of her plan. The following morning, Jasmine dressed with careful consideration, a perfectly tailored navy suit, minimal jewelry, hair pulled back in a sleek bun. Professional, powerful, unmistakably executive. She wanted no visual distractions from her message. With her were Charles Bennett, her legal counsel, Michael Robinson, her chief engineer, and Vanessa Martinez, who carried a slim briefcase containing evidence compiled from the whistleblower and other sources. They arrived at the airline's headquarters 30 minutes before the emergency board meeting was scheduled to begin. The security guard at the reception desk looked uncertain as Jasmine announced their arrival. I don't see you on the visitor list, Ms. Washington. That's because we weren't invited, Jasmine replied pleasantly. But the board will want to hear what we have to say before they make any decisions today. The guard made a call, speaking in hushed tones, then shook his head. I'm sorry, but without proper clearance, Jasmine pulled out her phone and tapped the screen. Immediately, the security barriers that required key card access opened simultaneously. The guard stared in shock. We'll find our way, Jasmine said, leading her team through the now open gates. They walked briskly toward the executive elevator, leaving the flustered guard calling frantically for backup. On the top floor, they strode purposefully toward the boardroom. 2 security officers approached, but Jasmine held up her hand. Before you consider removing us, you should know that I can access every digital system in this building with my phone. The elevators, the climate control, even the emergency protocols. I'd rather not demonstrate further, but I will if necessary. The security officers exchanged uncertain glances, then stepped aside. Without knocking, Jasmine pushed open the boardroom doors. Inside, 12 people sat around a massive table, with CEO Thomas Anderson standing at the head, mid-sentence. All heads turned in shock at the interruption. Ms. Washington, Thomas said, his face flushing with anger. This is a private meeting. You are trespassing. I'm aware, Jasmine replied calmly, walking to the empty end of the table opposite Thomas. But considering you're here to discuss the crisis I helped create, I thought I should be present. A murmur ran through the board members. Thomas's eyes widened. Are you admitting to criminal activity? I'm admitting to holding you accountable, Jasmine corrected. Something your board has failed to do for years. She connected her phone to the room's display system, bypassing security protocols as if they weren't there. The screen came to life, showing a timeline of documented racial discrimination incidents at the airline over the past 5 years. Let me introduce myself properly. I'm Jasmine Washington, CEO of CyberShield, the nation's leading cybersecurity firm. I'm also the black woman your gate agents refused to allow into first class despite having a valid ticket. But I'm not here about my individual experience. I'm here about the pattern. For the next 15 minutes, Jasmine methodically presented evidence of systematic discrimination within the airline, the internal memos about maintaining the exclusive atmosphere of first class, the statistics showing black passengers were disproportionately challenged about their tickets, the employee chat groups where racist comments went unchallenged by management. This isn't about a few bad employees, Jasmine concluded. This is about a corporate culture that tacitly approves of discrimination while publicly denying it exists. Thomas Anderson had remained standing, his knuckles white as he gripped the edge of the table. This is outrageous. You hack into our systems, disrupt our operations, and now you break into our headquarters to slander our company? It's not slander if it's true, Charles Bennett interjected. And we have evidence for every claim. One of the board members, an older woman named Elizabeth Carter, cleared her throat. Mr. Anderson, is any of this information inaccurate? Thomas turned to her in disbelief. Elizabeth, you can't be taking this seriously. I'm taking our fiduciary responsibility seriously, Elizabeth replied firmly. Our stock has dropped nearly 30%. We're facing potential class action lawsuits. And now we have evidence that company policies may have violated federal anti-discrimination laws. So yes, I'm taking it very seriously. Other board members began to nod in agreement. Thomas jabbed a finger toward Jasmine. This woman admitted to cyber terrorism. We should be calling the FBI, not listening to her demands. The FBI is already investigating, Jasmine said calmly. Both the technical disruptions and your discriminatory practices. Agent Reynolds is particularly interested in the contents of your personal devices, Mr. Anderson. Thomas's face went pale. Now, Jasmine continued, let's discuss how to move forward. I have specific demands that will address the systemic issues within your organization. Security. Thomas shouted. Remove these people immediately. 2 security officers appeared at the door, but they hesitated, looking to the board for direction. Elizabeth spoke up again. Wait. I think we should hear Ms. Washington out. This is insane, Thomas protested. She's threatening us. No, Jasmine corrected. I'm offering you a way to fix what's broken before it destroys your company. To demonstrate her point, she tapped her phone again. The lights in the boardroom flickered, and every screen on the table suddenly displayed screenshots of racist messages exchanged between Thomas and other executives. Would you like me to forward these to your shareholders? Jasmine asked quietly. Or would you prefer to discuss solutions? Thomas lunged toward her, but Michael stepped between them. The board members gasped at their CEO's loss of control. Mr. Anderson, Elizabeth said firmly, please sit down. Ms. Washington, what exactly are you proposing? For the next hour, Jasmine outlined a comprehensive plan for systemic change, independent audits of customer service practices, mandatory anti-bias training for all staff, diverse hiring at all levels including executive positions, transparent reporting of discrimination complaints, and financial compensation for passengers who had experienced documented discrimination. These changes aren't just morally right, Jasmine concluded. They're good business. Diversity drives innovation and expands markets. Inclusive practices build customer loyalty and employee retention. You have an opportunity to transform a crisis into leadership. The board members were listening now, some taking notes, others nodding thoughtfully. Thomas sat in seething silence, knowing his position was weakening by the minute. "And if we refuse?" one board member asked. In response, Jasmine caused every electronic device in the room to momentarily lose power. When they reactivated seconds later, the message was clear: she could do much worse if she chose to. "I prefer cooperation to coercion," Jasmine said. "But I will use every tool at my disposal to ensure accountability." Elizabeth turned to her fellow board members. "I move that we accept Ms. Washington's proposals and form a committee to implement them immediately. I further move that we request Mr. Anderson's resignation, effective immediately." "You can't do that," Thomas exploded. "Actually," said another board member, checking the company bylaws on his tablet, "with cause, we can. And I believe we have cause." The vote was taken right there, with Jasmine and her team as witnesses. Thomas Anderson was removed as CEO by unanimous decision, and Jasmine's proposals were accepted with only minor modifications. As Thomas was escorted from the boardroom, still protesting, Jasmine felt no satisfaction in his personal downfall. This had never been about individual punishment but systemic change. The real victory wasn't removing one man but transforming an entire corporate culture. "Ms. Washington," Elizabeth said, extending her hand. "This isn't how I expected today's meeting to go, but I believe it's ending better than it began. We have a lot of work to do." Jasmine shook her hand firmly. "Yes, we do. And I'll be watching to ensure it gets done." 6 months later, Jasmine settled into her first-class seat on the same airline, marveling at how much had changed. The gate agent had greeted her with genuine warmth, checking her ticket without a flicker of suspicion. The flight attendant, a young black woman named Tanya, had recognized Jasmine immediately. "It's an honor to have you on board, Ms. Washington," Tanya said quietly as she offered a pre-flight champagne. "What you did changed everything for us." The airline had undergone a remarkable transformation under its new CEO, Rachel Williams, a black woman who had previously led a successful hotel chain known for its inclusive corporate culture. The changes went far beyond superficial diversity training, they were structural and comprehensive. Flight crews now reflected the diversity of the passengers they served. The customer service manual had been completely rewritten with input from civil rights organizations. A transparent reporting system allowed passengers to flag concerning interactions, with each report reviewed by an independent committee. Jasmine picked up the in-flight magazine from the seat pocket. The cover story was titled, "Transforming Our Skies, Building an Airline Where Everyone Belongs." It detailed the company's journey from crisis to industry leader in inclusive practices. As the plane reached cruising altitude, Jasmine opened her laptop to check the latest figures. Cyber Shield had expanded dramatically in the past 6 months. The publicity from the airline incident had unexpectedly highlighted the company's technological capabilities, leading to new contracts and partnerships. They now provided anti-discrimination compliance systems to corporations wanting to proactively identify and address biased practices before they became liabilities. The investment meeting in San Francisco that had started this journey had ultimately been successful, though not with the original venture firm. After the airline incident made headlines, different investors had approached Jasmine, recognizing both the value of Cyber Shield's technology and the leadership qualities she had demonstrated. The company was now valued at $4.2 billion and expanding globally. But the changes extended beyond business success. The former gate agents and flight attendants who had discriminated against Jasmine and others were not simply fired, they were required to attend comprehensive sensitivity training as a condition of their severance packages. Some had genuinely learned from the experience and found positions elsewhere in the industry, now advocates for inclusive practices themselves. Jasmine had established a foundation supporting minority tech entrepreneurs, particularly focusing on young black women interested in cybersecurity. Each month, she personally mentored a group of high school girls, teaching them coding and network security while also sharing strategies for navigating predominantly white male spaces. The flight attendant approached with a tablet. "Ms. Washington, I thought you might be interested in this news alert." The screen showed a report about a major hotel chain implementing new anti-discrimination protocols after internal audits revealed troubling patterns in how rooms were assigned and upgrades distributed. The article mentioned that several other corporations had quietly launched similar initiatives, fearing they might become the next airline scandal. "It's happening across industries now," Tanya commented. "Companies are realizing discrimination isn't just wrong, it's bad business." Jasmine nodded, feeling a deep satisfaction that went beyond personal vindication. One act of standing up had created ripples far beyond what she had imagined possible. As the flight began its descent, Jasmine's phone rang with an unknown Washington, D.C. number. She answered cautiously. "Ms. Washington? This is Catherine Lewis from the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy. The President would like to speak with you about a potential nomination for the Presidential Medal of Freedom for your contributions to both technology and civil rights. Would you be available to visit Washington next week?" Stunned, Jasmine agreed to the meeting. As she ended the call, she looked out the window at the landscape below. From this height, artificial boundaries disappeared. Roads connected rather than divided. Everything was part of the same whole. The plane touched down smoothly. As passengers prepared to disembark, Jasmine remained seated, taking a moment to appreciate how far she had come. She opened her laptop one last time, accessing a secure folder containing the prototype for her newest project, an AI system designed to identify discriminatory patterns in housing applications and mortgage approvals, another area where systemic racism persisted despite laws against it. "This is just the beginning," she whispered to herself as she pressed enter, launching the program that would extend her fight for equality into new territory. Jasmine's story teaches us that systemic change requires both courage and strategy. When facing discrimination, speaking up is just the beginning. True transformation demands persistence and leveraging your unique strengths. The airline didn't change because of public shame alone. It changed because Jasmine demonstrated the real consequences of their actions in a language they understood: business disruption and financial impact. For those experiencing discrimination, remember that your individual experience is rarely isolated. It's usually part of a pattern that affects many others who may lack your platform or resources to fight back. By standing firm, you advocate not just for yourself but for everyone facing similar treatment. For companies, the lesson is clear. Discrimination isn't just morally wrong, it's a significant business liability. In today's connected world, unfair practices eventually come to light, and the cost of addressing them reactively far exceeds the investment in creating inclusive environments proactively. Most importantly, Jasmine's journey reminds us that systems designed to exclude can be redesigned to include. No discriminatory practice is too entrenched to challenge, and sometimes the most qualified person to lead that change is the very person the system tried to exclude. What would you do if you had the power to change an entire industry? Would you have the courage to stand up against discrimination even when it seems too big to fight? Comment below with your thoughts on how technology can be used as a force for equality. If this story inspired you, please like this video, subscribe to hear more stories of justice and transformation, and share it with someone who needs to be reminded of their power to create change. Thank you for witnessing this journey with me, and remember, justice often begins with one person refusing to accept the unacceptable.